Good day, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 86. As always, I'm going to start us off with a bit of a tune. Right.
You cricketing men, both young and old, whether you bat or whether you bowl, ponder a while on all you owe to the Wealden men of long ago. When Cromwell in those troubled times said bat and ball were aids to crime, let them be burnt was the command, and the Wealden men were cursed and damned. Unshaven turf, all swept and rolled, we score our runs and neatly bowled, but on flinty chalk and stubbled clay, those Wealden men first learned to play. We well applaud those mighty hits that clear the boundary rope for six, likewise for the you let them be burnt was the command, and the Wealden men were cursed and damned. Unshaven turf, all swept and rolled, we score our runs and neatly bowled, but on flinty chalk and stubbled clay, those Wealden men first learned to play. We well applaud those mighty hits that clear the boundary rope for six, likewise for the catch we loudly cheer, as those Wealden men did of yesteryear. Aye, we loudly clap when the 50's scored, and when 100 shows on the board, we give a shout and clap again, with the silent ghosts of those Wealden men. You cricketing men, both young and old, whether you bat or whether you bowl, ponder a while on all you owe to those Wealden men of long ago.
Okay, that was the Wealden men, which partly, I am told, it celebrates a royalist uprising against Cromwell, partly because he banned cricket and Christmas, amongst other things. But I'm not a big fan of Cromwell, so there you go. Welcome to my guest, Angloid Khan. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm doing grand.
Did you have a first subject you wanted to bring up?
The There's one like subject in terms of like gas prices, but there's also what I posted in Discord earlier this week about Google getting ready to subvert the Polish, the Czechs, and the Slovaks.
Go ahead then on that one.
Yeah, so on lately, because the Polish, Czechs, and Slovaks have taken in loads of like Ukrainian refugees, Global Harm is going to really gun for them by saying, "Oh well, you took in loads of Ukrainians. Why not taking a bunch of Abduls, basically?"
Oh yeah, okay. So Somalians and what have you, yeah.
Yeah, because that's the thing is, on one hand, I can support like the Polish doing that. However, by doing that, they're kind of giving up the moral grounds by which they opposed mass immigration in the past. So in 2015, for example, they said, "Well, we don't know what these people are. We don't know if they're rapists or whatever. We can't check them properly and whatnot." But when it comes to the Polish-Ukrainian border, we didn't really do the same checks that they were crying out for back in 2015. So you can't really use that moral argument anymore because then they'll say, "Oh, well, you're letting like millions of Ukrainians into your country. Why not do the same for black and brown people?" And can't exactly go because we don't like them because they'll just get sanctioned to high heaven if they do so.
Yeah, they'll get called racists, you know. Which is quite strange when most of the racism I see these days is anti-white racism. But there you go.
Yeah, it's kind of really screwed for the Polish because on one hand, you got Law and Justice, who I think people in the Discord now have not exactly got a high opinion of them because basically like the Tory party over here, just like a few decades behind, essentially. Like from what I see of Law and Justice, it's basically this kind of like the 50s Tories. That like they say they're anti-mass immigration and they market themselves as traditionally conservative, but at the end of the day, they're willing to cook. For example, when they took in the refugees, they needed money to cope with all the refugees, and so they just cooked to the EU demands on LGBT and migration. So they're going to prosecute hate speech in return for the EU money that they wanted to help deal with the flow of refugees. So Poland is going to become like the West in 10 to 15 years' time, the way it's going.
Yeah. Look, Poland's been full on backing Ukraine. I know that not all Poles agree with that, but a lot of them do because they don't like Russia much.
Yeah, I've seen Polish nationalists who they don't really hate Russia, like, and it's more like they hate the Ukrainians more because of like Banderovci in World War II and what they did in Volhynia.
Oh yeah, I watched that film you gave the link to in the Discord. You know where Bandera's lot were going around slaughtering Polish women and kids all over the place.
Yeah, so you'll get Ukrainians who come from the West going into Poland, and let's say they get their own apartment rooms. They'll put up portraits of Bandera on the wall, and the Polish landlords, for example, they take great offence to that. But then, if they complain, the government would just tell them to like shut the hell up because we got to do this to own the Russians, basically.
Yeah, no, you know my opinions on what's going on in Ukraine, and I think Russia is more sinned against than sinning for the most part. But there we go.
Yeah, I mean, people in the Discord server will also know my position on that as well as in general. Yeah.
Confusion and delay says the Poles I've spoken to hate all the Ukrainians in Poland, clogging everything up. So there you go.
Yeah, I've also seen I've seen like videos of Ukrainians doing petty crime because you get for example there have been Ukrainians in countries like the Czech Republic, Germany, and in Poland where the Ukrainians are being told, okay, you gotta start working now. It's been it's been some time since the war started. If you're going to live here for the medium term, at least get some income as opposed to depending on our goodwill.
Yeah, don't expect handouts. You mean?
Yeah, and a lot of Ukrainians just tell them to F off.
Well, I was
Well,
deep. I've been deeply surprised how many supposed Ukrainian refugees in the UK are actually brown. I always thought there weren't many brown and black people in Ukraine, but there we go.
yeah, it seems that the Ukrainians like the black sons so much. They like to have a lot of black sons.
Yeah. Well, we got to be careful what we say. This is YouTube, which is not a free speech platform, of course. But yes, I do see what you're saying.
Yeah,
I mean, of course, most of the people coming across the channel seem to be Albanians at the moment, which is weird because there's no war in Albania, you know.
I mean, given the way things are going on in Kosovo, I wouldn't be surprised if there will come one soon.
I don't know if you saw this. I saw on the Bias Brainwashing Corporation website earlier that apparently that dispute has been settled, but I don't know if that's true. That's what the EU is claiming, anyway.
Yeah, the Serbs on Telegram, they've got mixed opinions on it. On one hand, they're saying, "Oh, well, Vucic is buying time because they can't make their move on Kosovo because they're surrounded by NATO at the minute." But you got also other Serbs who say, "Look, Vucic is a cook. He will just he doesn't have any balls with him. He'll just chicken out as opposed to actually fight." So, because essentially the deal is that Kosovo will recognise that Serb car registration numbers in Kosovo, and Serbia will reciprocate, which is pretty much a de facto recognition of Kosovo as a country. So a lot of Serbs are understandably angered by that because they see Kosovo as a part of Serbia, not as its own thing.
Well, I saw some video footage of Serbian air defense systems being moved around, like Russian missile systems that the Serbs have got, because of course the Serbs and the Russians are pretty much allies.
Yeah, you get, for example, with Serbs, they are generally pro-Russian. In the context of the war in Ukraine, they've not. You'll get Serbs who, because they're anti-NATO, they will side with the Russians. But then normie Serbs, as in Serbs who are not politically into stuff, they generally are like, they're not pro-Ukrainian, but they don't like the bloodshed. Basically, they want the war to end ASAP because they see the Russians and Ukrainians as Slavic brothers.
Well, I mean, I think it's probably natural for most people to want the war to end, except for apparently the so-called elites of the Western nations who want to keep it going as long as possible, as far as I can work out.
I mean, it's one thing. Let's say a boomer living in Washington D.C. He's not attached to Russia and Ukraine like your average Serb is. Like they don't. Like for example, your average boomer in Washington doesn't speak a Slavic language,
for sure,
whereas Serbs do. So it's kind of closer to Serbs' heart than it is to the average Western guy's heart, should we say?
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I mean, I saw Boris Johnson the other day giving another £38 billion to Ukraine.
38 billion. I mean, I heard Joe Biden was giving away another $3 billion on top of the aid that America's already given to Ukraine. And I've heard also that the Ukrainian parliament has actually voted to give itself a 70% pay raise.
Okay.
And the money from that is not coming from the taxpayers in Ukraine. It's coming from Western taxpayers through the aid we give them. That explains why only 30% of the Western aid money actually gets spent on the armed forces there.
And that's, of course, aside from all the money which gets like siphoned off into assorted corruption scandals, for which Ukraine is extremely well known.
Yeah. The way it's going to go is it's going to be cheaper to pay the Ukrainian politicians in Ukraine than when all these politicians all emigrate to like Florida or somewhere like that. Knowing them, they'll probably put their money into Swiss bank accounts and just sun it up in the Caribbean. That's probably what they're going to do.
Doesn't Zelensky have a mansion in Florida?
I haven't really looked into that, but I've heard it's true.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's got a very large house in Florida.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, you got to think Ukrainians, Yeah, a lot of Ukrainian oligarchs have got houses in America. I mean, I think it was like the 2016 GLP conference was in a venue owned by Igor Kolomoisky.
Yeah,
Actually,
yeah.
so Ukrainian oligarchs have actually got more influence than I accounted for, to be honest.
And then there was a Ukrainian minister who was apparently arrested at the border who had like $1 million worth of cash on it.
Yeah, that was the Ukrainian minister's wife. You had Petro Poroshenko, who was like president before Zelensky. He actually bribed the army to ignore his son to like make sure his son didn't get drafted.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the oligarchical class who are doing draft dodging in Ukraine, while all the working class.
What a surprise!
Yeah. So Mihailo in Lvov is going to fight and die on the front lines, while some like oligarch's son gets to shy away from him fighting because his dad's got a lot of money.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I was watching a thing earlier. We've got another guest coming on in about 5 minutes, by the way, Engwood. Yeah, but I was watching a thing earlier which was looking at the fighting in Ukraine, and apparently one of the new Russian tactics is instead of occupying areas that they could occupy, they don't, and the Ukrainians keep putting more and more troops into it, and they just shell them to shit, you know. So, which like doesn't strike me as all that brainy on the Ukrainians' part, but you know, what do I know?
well, I mean, you gotta think with Slavs, it's that like so you take Russian army doctrine, which is you defend every square kilometer of ground like it's Russian territory. The Ukrainians also have that same doctrine. So let's say they got a piece of land, they'll send all the men to the front line to defend all the ground they got, even when it's militarily untenable to do so. It's kind of stupid looking at it from a military perspective, but that's the way the East Slavs can be like when it comes to defending their own territory or defending territory that they occupy at the moment. So that's what the Russians are doing. They're going to turn the front lines into the next Verdun. Only it won't be heavy casualties for the Russians.
Yeah, if they're just like shelling and rocketing the Ukrainians, they're not losing infantry doing that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I got my critiques of how the BTGs have a lot of firepower, but not enough infantry. But
yeah, for sure.
However,
but they do have a lot of firepower.
Yeah, that goes without saying.
I mean, look, for anyone who doesn't know, that's a battalion tactical group, by the way, a BTG. And basically what it is like 3 companies of infantry, a company of tanks, and a lot of artillery, and also air defense weapons and all sorts of other stuff. But as Angloid just said, it does tend to leave the Russians a little short of infantry sometimes.
Yeah, I think the way the war is going for Ukraine in terms of casualties, it's going to be like, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's as extreme as a Paraguayan war as it was for Paraguay, but it's certainly going to be a situation where Ukraine looks back at this and just thinks we lost an entire generation of young men in stupid war tactics.
Well, I mean, the Ukrainian army has already lost like double as many people as are in the entire British army in terms of killed, wounded, missing, and captured. They've already lost like twice the strength of the entire British army.
I'm at 150k lost. I looked deeper into that, and he basically said something like 82k dead, and then 75k wounded. It doesn't really elaborate on what wounded means, so I'm assuming that means wounded all in general, from like little like bits of shrapnel.
Yeah, it just means
injured.
Yeah, I'm sure that some of those guys will go back to their units, but don't forget, on top of that, you've also got all the guys who the Russians have captured, and it's quite a lot now. And then also the guys who are missing, and also there seems to be increasing numbers of desertions amongst the Ukrainians, and you can't really blame them.
Yeah, it's the National Guard units, I think they're called. National Guard? Oh, I forget the name, but basically the militias. Because they're the ones who, because you have the nationalist battalions like Azov and the Georgian battalion and all those lot, they get the best weapons, but then Then you got the regular army who get the second-rate weapons, and then third-rate weapons go to the militias. And
Yeah, they're like a territorial force, aren't they?
Yeah, territorial defense force. I think they're called. I keep forgetting the name, but yeah, territorial defense, kind of like the home guard. Only they're just told to plug the gaps of any defensive line and just hold as long as you can.
Yeah, just cannon fodder, basically.
Yeah, yeah. I think on the topic of like the Russian birthright, I mean, there's an argument to be had that with this war, it's actually brought a lot of vitality to the Russian people that they didn't have beforehand.
Maybe,
Because
maybe.
I mean, I don't know, because I mean it's too early to say as of yet. But
They've got to me, the effect this is going to have on Russia will depend on the Russians winning. Now, I can't see the Russians losing myself. I just don't see any way Ukraine can turn it around. They're not suddenly going to get 5,000 new tanks, because even if the West wanted to give them 5,000 new tanks, we don't have 5,000 tanks to give them. Like the entire British Army's tank stock is less than 200 these days. Germany is not a hell of a lot better. And other countries like Holland doesn't have any tanks at all these days.
yeah, I mean, you take the case of Germany. I mean, so when the war actually broke out, like, the Ukrainians were courting the Germans a lot because German weaponry has that reputation. But then they get these like Soviet era RPGs from the German, like from the former DDR stockpiles, which are badly maintained. So when the Ukrainians actually use them, more Ukrainian soldiers die using the said RPGs from Germany than Russians who die from those very East German RPGs.
Well, isn't it true that even the javelins and the NLAWs that were sent over there, many of these things that had dead batteries in them?
Yeah, it's not just that. We didn't even bother telling them. In the case of the NLAW, there's like a certain distance you have to have for the missile to arm itself. But we didn't tell
because it's a top attack missile. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but we didn't tell the Ukrainians that. So they're shooting at pretty much point blank range from like the top of a house, but there's not enough distance to arm a missile, so it just falls flat.
Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
Yeah, I've actually seen videos of that happening where Ukrainians fight NLAWs and there's not enough distance for it to arm a missile properly. So it just bounces off the tank, and then the tank blows them up.
People look at these things and they think they're like a World War II bazooka or something, and they're not. They're much more sophisticated. They're a top attack weapon, so you have to have a distance for the damn thing to go up in the air and then go down on the top of the tank, where the armor's thinner.
Yeah. So then you got the javelins. Yeah, you see like Ukrainian soldiers, where they're searching on the internet. What do I do when it's got no low battery, or what do I do when X problem is happening? Yeah.
Baron Badger makes a good point in the chat. It took the Russians 3 years to push the Germans out of Ukraine. It's a big country. Yes, it is. I mean, Ukraine's roughly the same size as Texas, which is an enormous state in the US. It's a very big country. People do not realize how big it is.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, I criticize like the slow pace of the Russian army, but then you also got balanced up with the fact that, Ukraine's being funded by the West, so.
And the Russians have by no means fully mobilized either.
No, I mean, the Soviet Union had a lot more manpower at its beck and call than.
But I mean, even Russia today has a lot more troops that they could send there, but they don't want to send them there. Particularly, they're not interested in sending their conscripts there as far as they can.
I mean, we did send some conscripts, but
originally, but I don't think that many of them are still involved in it. I mean, I've heard people saying that what the Russians may do is put conscripts into the already captured areas just to like defend against saboteurs and this kind of stuff, but they're not going to put them in the front line because they know they won't do very well.
Yeah, they don't want a repeat of Chechnya. That's one of the main problems the Russian army's got. They don't want a repeat of Chechnya all over again. So they're very hesitant to do a general mobilization, for example, because the Ukrainian army, it's trying to work on the same principle, but they finished it in the Winter War, whereas have like set up defensive lines out and have the Russians bang their heads against them. and cause heavy casualties. But then that strategy is negated by Russian artillery and air power, neutralizing that strategy. So,
Well, and we all know what happened to the Finns in the Winter War. Eventually, they lost in the end. You know?
yeah,
I mean, all right. Then they carried on with the continuation war, as they called it, when they were fighting alongside the Germans. But and again, they lost. So I don't see any way Ukraine can win this. I just do not. And I think the Western so-called military analysts who are suggesting Ukraine can win this are just talking rubbish. For one thing, Ukraine seems almost unable to launch a sizable counterattack.
no, I mean, I've heard about a counterattack near Izium.
Yeah, I saw that too, but it's not large.
Yeah, I've only seen like 3 Russian tanks destroyed. Which, if it was a big offensive, you'd expect a lot more than that.
Yeah, you can't look like a counterattack. You need to counterattack like with several brigades or a division. You can't a counterattack with 2 battalions is nothing. It's not going to do anything in the long run.
Yeah, that's because it's one of those situations where, on one hand, you've got the Ukrainians. Now, back in sort of March, April time, they're actually willing to compromise with the Russians. And then you have the likes of Boris Johnson and Joe Biden and all the rest of them who pretty much told Zelensky, hang on, we're going to fund you to the max. Like, don't make peace with the Russians, fight on. And so that's why the war is dragging on. And to the point where Zelensky refuses to compromise. He will say, this war will only end when Crimea has been taken back. Which
will be never. I mean, that's even if you could see Ukraine somehow counterattacking and winning back some of that territory in the Donbass, and I don't see them being able to do that, to be honest with you. They're certainly never going to take Crimea back. It's never going to happen. It's fantasy.
Yeah, and you're looking at that and you just think, I mean, what he's had to say? You can't even call it a comedy. It's like a Greek tragedy on steroids.
Well, did you see that the Royal Navy are now giving the Ukrainians training on British remote-controlled anti-mine stuff? Yeah, and we're going to give them some of the British and remote-controlled anti-mine vehicles, of which we have very few ourselves, I might add. But who put the mines there in the first place? The mines they're going to be clearing are Ukrainian mines. They're not Russian ones.
Yeah, I know the Bulgarians, the Turks, and the Romanians were actually really angry with Ukraine for that. Because now you've got shipping lanes in the Black Sea. They're going to be disrupted for years.
Because these mines come loose and they drift. And you'll get some poor bloody civilian ship or a fishing boat or whatever it might be going along that's going to get blown to smithereens by bloody Ukrainian mines.
Yeah. It's just... I'm just looking at that situation. It is really ironic how they never actually mentioned who laid the damn mines. Because I heard like back in May, they tried to blame it on the Russians. But then you're there thinking, okay, the Russian Navy is out there in full force up until when so why would they put mines that drift out at sea when the Navy is out at full force?
Yeah, no, the Russian Navy dominates the Black Sea. They don't. Mines are something that people put out as a defensive measure, and it's Ukraine who put the mines in the Black Sea, not Russia. AI, how you going, mate?
I'm good. How are you?
Not too bad. We're just talking about the situation in Ukraine, as you may have heard. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that. What do you think's going on? We were just talking about the British training and giving the Ukrainians remote-controlled anti-mine vehicles, of which the British ourselves have very few. And they're really going to be used to clear up Ukrainian-laid mines because the Russians didn't lay any.
Yes. So last I've heard that there was an attempt by the Ukrainian military to do like a counterattack over into the eastern part of the Dnieper. There was big hyped up talks about an attack on Crimea and sort of the reconquest of that. Obviously, it's not really come to anything. It's sort of gone out the news cycle. today at least. So I don't know what's happening with that. I don't know if there was an attempt by the Ukraine military to sort of gain a bit of ground or a footholding in the south.
We were just saying, Engloyd follows this more closely than I do, partly because he speaks Russian. There has been like a minor counterattack by the Ukrainians, but it's a small deal. It's not going to make any big difference to the war,
It depends if they can hold what bit, if they've captured anything. Number one, it depends if they can hold out, or because I can't. That's the problem. It's with the because what was it, a few months ago you had in the eastern part of in the Donbass region, you actually had quite a huge Russian offensive where they were gaining ground quite considerably each day, and it seems that obviously that offensive has sort of come to a halt now. Is there any? Do we know of any like major Russian troop movements? Maybe another offensive in the eastern portion?
They're still making steady progress. It's just not very quick because
but
the Ukrainians were very heavily dug in, particularly in towns and villages and this kind of stuff, and factories and what have you. And the Russians are having to winkle them out, but they don't want to do it with infantry because that would cause them very heavy casualties, and the Russians obviously don't want more casualties than they need to take.
Yes. Because I heard that Putin is set to. I saw reports of more Russian troops heading to the front. That's why I was wondering if there was a possible another sort of offensive in Ukraine, like a sort of a large scale offensive.
From what I heard, these new Russian troops were actually some of them are volunteers because they're getting quite a lot of volunteers in Russia apparently, and others are new units that have been mobilized. And these guys have been under training for a while, and so they've been called up for quite a while, some of these guys, but they've just been being trained because it takes quite a long time to train a decent soldier. You're looking at a minimum of 4 months, say, really, just to get a really basic soldier. And for anything technical, you're looking at longer than that. Like I said, I don't see any way possible for the Ukrainians to turn this around. They're just going to keep losing, and it's just a matter of how quickly they lose, not whether they don't lose.
Yeah. I mean, have you? I imagine you've mentioned this on your channel before, but if cast your minds back, everyone, to the start of the invasion. What was it? The initial sort of days of the invasion. You had like these weapon drop-off points where they were encouraging just any sort of civilian of any age, remember, because it was they were encouraging any age to just come to this point, pick up a Kalashnikov and a guide to making Molotov cocktails and go and take out that Russian APC over there.
Yeah, as if that will work, but yeah. And I mean, apparently, I think the maximum age for call up in Ukraine now is 70 for blokes. You can be called up as someone who is 70. Now, let me tell you, I'm bloody 56, and I would not be very good as a soldier these days because I'm not as fit as I used to be. So, what a 70-year-old is supposed to do, I really do not know. It's just absolutely crazy.
So they're scraping the bottom of the barrel at the moment.
Well, yeah, I mean, we were saying earlier that according to some reports, the Ukrainians have lost more dead than the entire strength of the British Army already. And then on top of that, of course, you've got all the wounded, all the guys who are missing or have deserted, and all the guys the Russians have captured.
Yes. Do we know actually? Because I do remember, like in Lviv, there were these. I can't find the BBC articles because I think they've deleted them because of obvious reasons. But there was actually showing children, as young as 7, learning to use a Kalashnikov and other sort of. I think like a Browning and other weapons as well, and also again Molotov cocktails.
Not
Do we?
terrible. They're not. Molotov cocktails are not terribly efficient against modern armored vehicles, to be honest. But yeah.
But do we know? Do we know any sort of? Is any stories coming out of about children being recruited in any way in the Ukrainian side?
I haven't seen all that much about that. I've seen quite a lot of stuff about women being recruited, but I mean, have you seen anything, Angwood?
I remember like watching voice videos back in like 2017 of Azov training kids, like the age of 12 upwards, to like learn how to use a Kalashnikov and whatnot. So
And the Azovs, for people in the chat, are literally neo-Nazis, literally.
yeah, I mean, I did pass them in Discord. I am a bit hesitant to call them neo-Nazis because they just seem to do for LARPing and aesthetics. They're not. A lot of them don't seem to be ideologically so because they're serving a Jewish oligarch president.
Yeah, but
they've got Israeli support weapons.
But did you see when a lot of them were captured by the Russians, Angwood, and the Russians made them strip their tops off?
Yes, saw that. Yeah,
and all the swastikas and all the rest of it that they had tattoos of.
Yeah, one thing you have to keep in mind is with Ukraine, their national identity is literally built on hating Russia. So that's why you will see them LARPing as should we say the spicy Germans, for one of the better term. You see them LARPing as them because they know Russians dislike that. That's one reason. A lot of them will be ideologically into it. I've no doubt about that because people are weird.
You can't. I mean, one thing I as someone who, if you look into Operation Barbarossa and the German capture and redistricting of Soviet territories like in Estonia, in Latvia, and of course in modern day Ukraine, and Belarus and everything. The amount of support the naughty German group got in those areas was quite unprecedented. The Ukraine, I mean, you had, I can't remember how many volunteers into the SS division, but also you had, and this is something that's not really talked about. I remember speaking to a few German veterans many years ago at a barbecue. A lot of the I guess you say war crime acts against the Jewish population in places like Poland was actually conducted by Ukrainians.
Yes,
Ukrainian militia sponsored by the naughty German group.
Yeah, absolutely correct. And we were actually saying before you came on, AI, that Angloid, for example, knows quite a lot about this because he speaks Russian. And the same Ukrainians who were killing loads of Jewish people were also killing loads of Polish people.
Yes, I mean, I did actually. When I was living in Devon, we had a neighbour. She was Polish, and she was in Poland at the time. And I mean, she was saying that one thing that's really, which was, I guess, in my mind, quite mind blowing, because you would expect her to have sort of a deep rooted hatred of the Germans, but in many ways, she actually said that the Germans were the friendliest to them. This is the Wehrmacht Germans that she came across, and it was the Ukrainians who were the ones that were cruel and sadistic towards the population. And so she had this deep hatred of Ukrainians, really deep hatred of Ukrainians. It was really something rather interesting. And she lived not too far from, I think probably not too far from the border with Ukraine and Poland. She lived in that sort of southern region there of Poland. So yeah, I mean that was quite interesting because of course what you're taught in history and everything, it doesn't. In some ways, it doesn't always translate across in that regard. That sort of cultural hatred
Oh, look,
between.
even before World War II, Bandera's Ukrainians were surrounding mainly Polish villages in Ukraine, and totally slaughtering and literally chopping into little pieces every child, woman, and old age pensioner they could find in the place.
Mm.
Like really vile torture of the worst kind you can think of. And this was even before the war.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
go on, Angloid. I beg your pardon. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I was just going to say, yeah, that's with the Polish. It's on one hand they can hate Russia like because of history, but also they hate, but then, but because their hatred of Russia because with the ruling party law and justice, they base their nationalism on hating Russia. So they'll take in loads of Ukrainians, even those that support Bandera and his lot. They'll take in those, and then because I hate Russia so much, they'll try and shut up anyone who dares talk about Ukrainians. So there's kind of like a hierarchy of hatreds in review of the ruling party. But then you get the Polish, who, like average Polish guy, who would say, "Well, I hate Ukrainians as much as I hate the Russians," or "I hate Ukrainians more than Russians," because with the Russians, sure, they'll invade my country, but they don't do the same stuff to us as what the Ukrainians did to us.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I also sorry, I don't want to crap, but one thing I was going to say was there was the GB News presenter Mark Stein who did actually talk quite interesting during the start of the conflict. He went to the sort of Carpathian region of Ukraine, which has a high portion of Ukrainian nationals who have I guess you could say like a dual nationality type status with Hungary, because of course that region during the Austro-Hungarian era was part of the Hungarian kingdom, part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and historically part of the Hungarian kingdom. And there was even then there was some talk. There was some talk amongst people in that region that if you know, at that time it looked like Russia was going to have quite a swift victory, because they were still sort of milling around in the capital Kiev and what have you. And there was some talk about whether if there was a dissolution of Ukraine state, they might that portion would go back to Hungary, and then maybe Lviv would sort of come under Polish influence, and you would have like a sort of a natural return to sort of cultural spheres of influence.
I have seen people who say this may happen. I don't see Poland actually taking anything in Ukraine, but I mean, you know, time will tell, I guess.
I mean, in the case of Poland, I mean, I've actually seen them be like. This is one reason why they're friendly with the Ukrainians so much is because you have this Polish idea of intermarrying, where they want all countries from like Finland all the way to Bulgaria united in some sort of anti-Western and also anti-Russian alliance, where there is resist Oklahoma, but so you'll see the Polish government, they're trying to court over the Ukrainians to be a mass sphere of influence, so then they can put them into this intermarrying group, because Poland's also got the Baltics and Finland to be friendly with. But I mean, I've got my critiques of that intermarrying idea. So
yeah, no, that's quite interesting. Cardamon in the chat said, "Would it be possible for the Russians to prevent Western arms from getting into Ukraine, or could that risk a war with NATO?" I think the Russians do intercept a fair amount of the Western weapons when they're in Western Ukraine.
Yes, because my understanding is a good portion of like vehicles, tanks, and weapons have actually gone like via train through, I think it's Slovakia. Yeah. And so as soon as they cross the border into Ukraine, that's when they're targeted. And I know that like the fear has obviously been, well, what happens if a Russian pilot who is not very might make an error in judgment or what have you, and accidentally bomb it on, let's say, the Slovakian side, and that could cause a crisis. But I mean, what is interesting is Hungary is under Viktor Orban has actually been quite anti-Zelensky in this, and also you got sort of rumblings down in Kosovo with the Serbs, who of course have a quite closely tied with Russia, and I do wonder if there would be a point where Russia might want to open up a second front in Europe in the Balkans, because that could.
I just don't think that's very likely, to be honest with you. I mean, I think Russia is. The question for the Russians is where are they going to stop? I mean, I don't see them really stopping until they get to the Dnieper River, to be quite honest with you. And then the only question is, are they going to take the big seaport in the south? What's it called? Odessa, yeah. Which has a very large Russian population, so or ethnic Russian population, I should say. So I think that's the only question, really, is which would turn the remaining bit of Ukraine into a really rump state with no coast.
Yeah, on the topic of Hungary hating Ukraine, it's because that part of Hungary, that part of Ukraine called Zakarpattia Oblast, because it used to be part of Hungary. There's a lot of Hungarians living there still. In 2017, we passed this education law where all the institutions and, like, for example, schools, they all have to teach in Hungarian. Like the ethnic minorities, be they Russian, Romanian, Hungarian, whatever, they can't have their own schools anymore. It all has to be in Ukrainian, which the Hungarians took particular offense to that. They say, like, the Hungarian government actually threatened to veto any sort of EU accession for Ukraine because of that law, because it discriminated against the minorities, be they Russian, Hungarian, Romanian, whatever.
Baron Badger in the chat says, is CRP still commenting on events? Yes, he is to some degree. Not that I entirely trust him, but yes, he is still commenting.
I mean, there's an argument to be had that he's being used by the SBU. I mean, he got arrested by them. There's no way they're not surveilling him. There's no way they're not using him as a means of catching out anyone who's on pro-Russia.
Yeah, I strongly suspect there might be some truth in that, Angloid. I really do. He's not a character I would fully trust, I must admit.
CRP, that's
Coach Red Pill.
Coach Red Pill, yeah.
He was supposedly arrested by the SBU, and if he was, and I think there is still an if about that, they let him go, and he's still been commenting on everything. And I wonder if Angloid is not right, and they're just not using him as bait,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was very sensible going to a country that's in a conflict and sort of going against the Zelensky regime, which, I mean, at that point, we all knew, because I was watching his content at the time, that Zelensky was banning political opposition parties, and restricting various outlets and stuff. And so he put himself in quite a bad situation, I think, that was unnecessary for everyone involved.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. Don't disagree with that at all. Mitch, Scott Ritter's wife had a good comment about him. What was that?
Oh, basically that, because Scott Ritter's wife is, I think she's Belarusian, if I'm not mistaken. So she knows how a lot of SBU work, and she pretty much said, "Well, I just said that there's no way they let him go without some strings attached, basically." And that because CRP fell out with Scott Ritter quite a few times.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
So, yeah, there's an argument about that CRP is causing a lot of shit stirring for his, because he's been checked over by the SBU.
Certainly wouldn't surprise me. All right, any final comments on this, and then we'll move on to another topic?
Nope.
Okay. Angloid, you got any final comments before we move on to something else?
Can't say that I do.
All right, AI, did you have something in particular you would like to speak about as a first thing?
Right. So, do you all agree that the trains should run on time?
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, sure.
Okay.
I don't know who. I don't know anyone who would disagree with that. If you're gonna have a timetable, you might as well stick to it. Eh?
Well, I've discovered today that is possible dog whistling, as I've been accused of.
What, for wanting the trains to run on time? That's dog
Apparently it's
whistling.
like so there was a really cringeworthy like Tory sort of round, like a Tory function, Tory function chat around this table, like there's like a video from TikTok, I think. It was put on Twitter and it was by some socialist account, and they went around the table and it was like explaining each one of them was explaining their ideological beliefs, and they were saying, "Oh, right-wing libertarian, classical liberal, usual stuff." And then one of them just says, "I just want the trains to run on time." And this particular young Tory has now been, was sort of picked up or noticed by the left because, of course, that is a sort of like a dog whistle to Mussolini's.
Mussolini made the Italian trains run on time. Yes, I know that. Yeah.
Yes. So, and there's been this sort of interesting sort of thing. I want this to become I want this to become a dog whistle, actually, for our side, for getting the saying that political belief is to get the trains running on time. And so that's sort of been the. I mean, on the topic of actually of in this country we've got strikes, never-ending strikes now. With what was it, with the post office, with the barristers, with
bin men, I see.
Dockyard workers, binmen, I mean, there's quite a lengthy list at this point. I don't know if we got to the gravediggers yet.
So it's like going back to about 1978 or something, isn't it?
Yeah, and we haven't had any rolling blackouts yet, but I reckon it will happen towards the end of this year.
Yeah, well, that's gonna be the final topic for the stream in a bit. So yeah, or stuff around that. What do you say to that one, Angworth? Is it a dog whistle to say you want the trains to run on time?
I mean, I'll put in chat a certain spaghetti boy made them run on time in Italy. So
yeah.
That's all I'm gonna say.
It's just I don't know. Things are just so ridiculous in the UK and the West more generally these days that you kind of like you kind of get what's the word I'm looking for? Like there is so much ridiculous stuff that you kind of get used to it in a way,
Yeah. I mean, I did on the topic of trains running on time, because I think John Best put up here that he was meant to take a train journey from Lyme Regis from Carlisle to Lyme Regis, and it was meant to take about 6 hours. Took 8 hours. For me, this is a sign of civilizational collapse when the train journeys are not punctual, where they are do not arrive on location on time, and I think this is a. This actually is a potential for the right, a winning point here. Making sure that the trains run on time and turn up and take people from point A to B on time. And maybe we should take a sort of leave out Spaghetti Man's book on this.
Look, as far as I'm aware, like 19th century Victorian British trains didn't run on time, and I'm pretty sure that 19th century Britain wasn't fascistic. So, although I dare say some of our diverse people these days, shall we say, would try and claim it was, So, Ethan McBride in the chat says, being born and raised in the UK is blackpilling, and I don't say that easily. Yeah, I know what you're saying, mate.
Walking through Bristol like I did the other day is just blackpilling. I mean, every time I go up there, it's like progressively getting worse.
Did you go anywhere near St Paul's?
Well, I went to Cabot, which is like just down the literally next to St. Paul's. So I mean, yeah, I've been. It's yeah. Bristol makes me want to Fed post. Yeah, it's especially in Pride Month when you go down there. It's like and you got actually like now just like in Cabot there's this one huge lingerie shop. I just call it a sex shop because that's what it really is, and it's just now it's just all out in the public now. I mean, it's hedonistic society, and what's crazy is all the families that you see walking around there are all Muslim of origin, because you got all the women wearing like the burqas and hijabs, and then you have all like the sort of individual Zoomer millennial girls walking around with their sort of friends, and then you have all the sort of like chavvy looking hipster boys with their shitty haircuts walking around. I just can't stand it.
Skinny jeans, yes.
Yeah.
I know these people. Sadly, I know them by sight. I might add, not personally, but yeah. I don't know, man. It's just crazy. But I mean, making the trains run on time is fascist. I tell you that. If you say so. It's all I would say to that. All right. Well, we were talking obviously about the situation in Ukraine for quite a long time, and that has a bearing on our final topic for this evening, which is the energy crisis in Britain and Europe, which is, as far as I can work out, almost entirely a self-inflicted wound.
Yes.
We've been closing down coal-fired power stations. We haven't been building nuclear power stations as we should have been. We have been relying on these bird murdering wind farms all over the place, which don't work when the wind don't blow, and there's no way to store the stuff even when it does. And in UK particularly, on all these, we're now wanting to put thousands of solar panels on farmland, which is going to totally destroy it for wildlife, apart from anything else. And again, the sun doesn't always shine in the UK, amazingly enough. And again, even when it does shine, there's no way of storing it. So all of this, and also, the whole watermelon green, because it's green on the outside, but it's like communist socialist red on the inside. It's watermelon green, net zero nonsense. And then putting sanctions on Russia, which we didn't have to do. All of that is what's causing this energy crisis, which has seen British bills, or will see British bills, double pretty much by later in the year.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
what do we have to say on that, guys?
I mean, what is there to say other than to get blackpilled about it?
So the current narrative is that we have to, in the UK, that is, we in the UK, have to prepare for rolling blackouts, as we mentioned earlier, and other shortages and prices, because the Ukrainian people deserve and need our support during their their glorious war against the evil Putler.
They're totally losing war against the evil Putler, of course. But but I mean, so British old age pensioners should freeze to death in the coming winter because they can't afford to heat their homes and eat. Is really what these people are saying.
Yeah, because of course the British people have a long entrenched history with the Ukrainian people, dating back probably about 2,000 years, maybe more. The various Peshnek and Cuman tribes that dotted the landscape, had wonderful relations with both the Anglo-Saxon kings and the Normans and the Plantagenets and all of them. It was just one great cultural exchange, and it was of course we must stand shoulder to shoulder with our brothers in Ukraine. Slava Ukrainia, everyone.
Could I just say I don't give two shits who runs Ukraine? I don't care. It's not a vital interest of Britain at all. No vital interest to Britain whatsoever who runs Ukraine. Makes no difference to British people. And in fact, by making Russia an enemy, you're making Britain less secure.
Yes.
But that's just the plain and simple truth. When the British Armed Forces themselves have never been weaker, unless you go back to about 1712 or 1720, something around there.
Yeah,
the whole British Army is 82,000 men, and they can't even, and far too many women, of course, and they can't even recruit that 82,000. The Royal Navy, the Royal Navy has a whole 17 frigates and destroyers, and at the time of the Falklands War in 1982, the Royal Navy had over 70 frigates and destroyers. Now we've got 17, and the Royal Air Force is a tiny shadow of itself 20 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, the fundamental, and something I've sort of reiterated on my channel, is that the problem that will ever, if Britain was ever to face any sort of war or conflict in the future, the problem that, and I think this probably goes for America and maybe even Australia and maybe a few other nations in the English-speaking world, is that I do not believe the population are so disconnected from the new culture and the regime who run our nations that I don't think people would be willing, like you've seen in Russia and like you see in places like Syria and everything, to join up and volunteer in military units to defend the nation. Because the problem is, and then this is something that may be hard to swallow for some of you, but I don't think Britain in its current state is worth defending.
Yeah, look, I joined the British Army at 18. My son is serving today in the Royal Navy. And you know what? If he was thinking of joining the Royal Navy today, I'd probably tell him not to.
Yeah.
And I certainly wouldn't join the British Army today. I wouldn't even consider it.
No.
Why? What are you going to defend?
Well,
apart from the fact the British Army is too small, literally too small to defend anything. What are you defending? I mean, modern Britain. What does modern Britain stand for except feminism, diversity, drag queen story hour, and LGBTQ shit?
Yeah.
And ever more mass immigration. That's what Britain stands for today. I'm sorry, it is.
And you have veterans nowadays, veterans from the Northern Ireland, the conflicts and the troubles in Northern Ireland, who are now being one by one private prosecutions, and even I think even on CPS level prosecutions against them.
I'm not absolutely certain, but I think the British government did finally stop that last year.
Oh,
they said they won't allow that anymore, but up until last year they were. And of course, at the time of the Good Friday Agreement, the PIRA, the Provisional IRA terrorists and murderers, were mostly just let out of prison.
Yeah, and also you've had servicemen in Afghanistan. One notable one near where I live
who have been prosecuted. Yes, absolutely correct.
Who's been prosecuted, and I met his wife, and I've met his colleagues, friends who were present at the time.
And he was actually in prison for quite a while.
He was imprisoned, and it took its toll on him. I mean, at the end of the day, these people do not have your backs, and all they want you to do is they want you to be present so they can bully and humiliate you and degrade you because of your race, and then tell you to go off and fight in some useless war that they want to, that they've created, die in some shithole country that they funnel money through.
Well, look at how many, at least 700 British soldiers were killed in Iraq and Afghanistan for absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. All of those guys, brave as they were, and I absolutely do believe they were brave, they all died for absolutely jack shit.
Yeah.
It was so bad that when Britain left, we had to take the war memorial to our dead back to Britain because the Afghans would have destroyed it.
Yeah, and same with the troops in Iraq. I mean, the only conflict in recent memory that I would say was worthwhile was probably the Falklands War.
Yeah, because that was recapturing British islands full of British people.
Yes, and
So yeah,
who remain today British, and have their rights. But even today, I think if Argentina was to invade the Falkland Islands today, I don't actually think the British government would do anything. I think they would do I think you would have the usual Tory tough talk and all that about going to do something. But I think that it would amount to a complaint in the UN, and that'd be it.
I don't know, mate. I hope not, but But I mean, to be fair, Argentina probably doesn't have the resources to invade them anymore.
Oh no, I don't think they've ever. I don't think with the Navy they've ever actually recovered. Since the conflict.
I mean, last I heard of Argentina, their former president, was it Christina Kirchner or something like that?
Yeah,
has been arrested again for corruption.
Yeah.
So they're still having more trouble.
I mean, look, every like I watch Forces News on YouTube, and Forces News is actually British Forces News, and it's paid for by the Ministry of Defence. So, in other words, British taxpayers. And nearly every video they put up is either about Afghans arriving in Britain. There's loads of those. Or it's about women, or it's about LGBTQ people in the military, or it's some bullshit like that, which has got absolutely nothing to do with British defence, really.
No. I don't know if you heard, Andrew, we've had a recent sort of, which is still ongoing, with the RAF sort of banning applicants who are
straight white men. Yeah, they don't want straight white men. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I mean, there is a anti-straight white male agenda all around the Western world. All you've got to do is watch any TV show, any Hollywood movie, and the vast majority of TV adverts to realise that that's what's going on. It's you don't have to be Brain of Britain to work it out.
No, I mean there may come a point in the future that the British Army, the regular recruits in the British Army, who are still white males, straight and everything, and not, but will have to make a choice to side with us or side with the machine higher up.
Oh man, we're going a bit away from this energy crisis that I want to talk about, but yeah, I'm always very inclined to talk about the appalling things that are happening to the British Armed Forces. I mean, because people talk about what's going on with the US Armed Forces, and how the LGBTQ thing and feminism and diversity is the big deal there. Anyone who doesn't think the same thing's happening to the British Army and the Royal Air Force and the Royal Navy is just not paying attention. And also, I might add, the same thing is happening to the Australian Defence Force as well. It's just disgusting. And the next time we end up fighting a war, and we will eventually, because that's what happens, we are going to bloody well lose because of it.
Yes.
And I think the same thing could happen to the Americans as well. And for anyone in the chat who thinks modern warfare is all about drones and missiles and all that shit, you still need blokes with rifles to occupy ground. And they do need to be blokes.
One of the problems that I've noticed is there's a lot of people, and I think this comes from the NATO intervention in the Bosnian conflict, that they think they can win a conflict via the air, and that is just in two modern superpowers with professional militaries. That's just not the case. You do need to capture ground. You need
and the Russians these days, for example, have some very capable SAMs, some very capable surface-to-air missiles. And that's aside from their own aircraft, of course. So but yeah, it's just to me, like, it horrifies me what's happening to the British Armed Forces. It really does. Like how weak they now are, and how they're being made weaker by this feminism and LGBTQ shit and fake diversity. More British Muslims, British in inverted commas, more British, in inverted commas, Muslims by a long, long way joined the Islamic State than have ever joined the British Armed Forces. And that the Islamic State, which was a terrorist and slaving state.
Yes.
Yeah, on the topic of the army, I mean, put it this way. I find it more believable if, like, for these LGBT units, if they actually use them as biological weapon via monkeypox or something.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree. Send them over there and give them monkeypox.
They can like fuck the Russians to death.
Hang on, guys, we got to be careful. YouTube is not a free speech platform.
Sorry.
Let me remind you. Yep.
Can't we be more benevolent for all the Russian femboys out there from Chelyabinsk all the way to Vladivostok or whatever?
Yeah. We mean in Minecraft, of course, Susan. We love everybody, we really do, but not as many people as some of the gay guys do. But oh dear, I don't know. But look, we are seeing more and more serious financial people pointing out that Britain's going to have a real inflation rate of over 20% at some stage next year. Mm-hmm. Interest rates are going to have to go up a fair bit higher than they have already. And like I said, basically energy bills are going to double just come the end of the autumn, let alone what's going to happen next year. Do we think this is going to lead to civil unrest or whatever?
I think you'll probably see rioting, you'll probably see strikes, you'll probably see violence on the picket lines and all that sort of stuff.
I'm thinking of like lots of diversity rioting in London and Birmingham and those sorts of places, and Bristol, as you were talking about earlier. I'm thinking that sort of thing's quite likely.
So one of the problems with Bristol is that most of the people, I guess you'd say the people who commit the riots mainly in Bristol are middle class Antifa types, like at Stokes Croft. Even in 2011, a lot of them were that sort of group. I with Bristol, that might just be the usual Antifa sort of like, because it's kind of like Portland in many ways. But yeah, inner city rioting, yeah, it could happen. I think it depends what angle. If there's any like police racism, police corruption, racist society, it depends if they do the BLM narrative story again, but like from a different perspective.
Oh, that's undoubtedly how they'll try to cover it for sure. And like people like the Bias Brainwashing Corporation, the BBC, they'll try and show it in that light. But what I'm hoping is that what it will really do is it will wake a lot of normies up to the fact that diversity is really not so great to have.
No, I hate to say this, but I don't think there's any. I don't think the normie will ever be woken up. I think the only time the normie will ever change is when people like us, like this show that we got going now, is on the 9 o'clock news, and we're telling normies, by the way, diversity is evil, equality is unnatural, and make of that of what you will, and just do like a compilation of clips of certain groups, racial groups, beating the hell out of other groups, live coverage of Telford. I mean, take your pick, but that's what it would take for the normie to wake up, is basically them being told, because I do view the majority of the public as cattle. Unfortunately, I think they will follow whatever the establishment at the time will say. I think they'll yes, if there was rioting and everything, people would be angry. The wider public would be angry, but they will allow these people to riot and do whatever they want, because they did it in 2020. They did it in 2011. They did it in 2020. So, yeah, I mean,
I just think if you're going to get bills that people can't afford to pay, and there are going to be bills people can't afford to pay if it's going to go up as much as most people seem to think it will now. If you're going to get that, and you're also going to get certain amounts of food shortages, and you're going to get rolling blackouts, which I think we are going to get come the winter, I think a combination of those things is going to cause a lot of shit. I really do.
It depends what is waiting in the wings as an alternative. So if there was like serious civil unrest, would it just collapse like the government of the day, or would it actually just bring down the entire system? But to do that, you'd also have to ask the question: would the whole system in the European Union and America collapse as well? I mean, could this be like the what's been sort of titled the circulation of elites from
Well,
this could happen. Sorry, I was just going to say, remember the 1848 revolutions. Something like that was very similar, because you actually had, now even though it wasn't successful in large parts, one thing that did occur was you had a sort of the rise of the sort of I guess say like the proto-managerial middle classes, and you had a complete weakening at the time of the monarchist powers. I mean, there were nations where there was rather successful. I think France and a few places in Italy as well, when you had sort of like a coalition of nationalists, liberals, and then of course Marx was around. He sort of sprung up around that time as well with his papers, and so it depends what happens if there's any group waiting in the wings to take over when the proverbial hits the fan.
Maybe. I mean, look, one thing I will say is that people who I respect are telling me that this energy crisis in Europe is actually going to turn into a Eurozone crisis, which I think is very likely.
Yeah,
and don't forget the Eurozone is already a total mess because of the difference between the richer northern countries and the much poorer southern countries. So
yeah,
I think it has the potential to turn into something really big.
I think Germany's in a really sort of big trouble because, of course, a good portion of their gas was from that Russian pipeline, which is no longer operational. I guess that it's hard to say what. I think also it depends what happens with America as well. Because if America goes, like if American sort of hegemony in world hegemony goes, not so much the the actual American state, but their sort of power abroad, then I think you'll see a lot of new sort of maps being drawn up.
Look, I think it's undeniable that US power abroad is shrinking. There's no doubt of that whatsoever. I mean, one of the things that we've seen in Ukraine, for example, is that whilst the US State Department, which is full of neocons, were all for being more and more aggressive against the Russians, the people who've been stopping them doing that is the US Department of Defense, who are a bit more realistic and know that America can't do that.
No.
They simply do not have the military power to do it, particularly when they're also faced, again, partly through their own fault, with a threat in the Far East with China.
Yeah. I mean, one problem that could come from all of this is, of course, with the energy problems and the civil unrest. There's two ways it could go. The regime in the West could actually double down and just go full authoritarian mode, i.e., any sort of pretense of individual liberties or civil rights or whatever will just disappear, and they'll just operate as any any sort of.
We've already seen a lot of that during the China virus lockdown. So
Yeah. But you're going to have. I've always said that there's going to be climate lockdowns. I think that is still on the card.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly possible as well. But again, will people put up with it? I don't know. Like I live in Melbourne, and Melbourne had the longest lockdowns in the world. And the bloke who did it, Dictator Dan, as he's known, a Labour politician, needless to say, it still might win the local election because there are so many in Melbourne City. Although the people in the countryside hate him, and most of the small country towns hate him. The Melbourne, which has it's the second biggest city in Australia, it's got like 4 million plus people. Melbourne has far more influence because of how large it is. And Melbourne itself is full of soy boys and feminists and LGBTQ types and lefties. It just is. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I moved out of Melbourne deliberately. I live like 60 k's out of Melbourne these days, but I moved out deliberately just because I hated living there. But I don't know. If things get as bad as I think they're going to get over the winter, we really could possibly see some shake-ups, and it might be the best chance for people on the right for something to actually change. I mean, I noticed that Mish in the chat turned around and said Farage needs to come around to this point of view, and I don't disagree with that. I mean, I have my criticisms of Farage, but he's about the best there is in the UK at the moment. So, I don't know. Well, Mitch, you haven't said anything for a while. Sorry, Angloid, you haven't said anything for a while. What do you think?
When it comes to the UK, I mean, on one hand, I reckon we'll see some civil unrest or whatever you want to call it. But I don't think there'll just be some sort of like Arab Spring in this country where we told to get rid of all the corrupt politicians and we have like this revolution or whatever. I think it will just.
No, I'm not suggesting it would be as radical as that. But what I am suggesting is you might get a big enough shake-up to see differences in voting patterns and this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I still think the Boomers will vote Conservative. I mean, I don't think they're going to vote. I mean, who's there to vote for? Because I'm thinking, let's say Farage endorses Reform UK. Do you think they'll tip the Boomers over to what's his name in charge of Reform UK? I don't know because I mean I've got my critiques of Reform UK leadership.
Yeah, I me too. But at this stage, Richard Tice, yeah. But I mean, look, I've certainly got my criticisms of Reform UK. My major thing is that all of these small right of centre, semi-populist parties need some sort of at least a loose election alliance. They need to stop spending more energy fighting each other than they do fighting the Conservatives.
The problem with populism is that it's easily co-opted by other parties, as we have seen.
It can be, yes, absolutely it can be. But I mean, on the other hand, you can see something like Brexit where it worked.
I mean, you had the likes of Tom Harwood who tried to hijack it for their own neoliberal interests. So there is that.
Yeah. But I mean, if you look at UKIP up until the Brexit referendum, they were winning. I mean, the only reason we got a referendum was because the Conservatives were worried enough to do one. They didn't want to. And also, of course, they were sure they were going to win it. So I'm not totally black-pilled. I don't support being totally black-pilled. I think it's a foolish way to be. While there's life, there's hope. And there is still life in Anglo-Celtic Britain, just about. But I don't know. If something doesn't happen this winter, I don't know when there's going to be a better opportunity for something really radical to happen. And like I say, I'm not suggesting there's going to be a revolution that sweeps away all our corrupt traitor elites. I wish, but it ain't going to happen, sadly. But like a fundamental change in voting patterns and this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
So, do we have any final thoughts on that one, guys? I mean, look, 20%, over 20% inflation, which is what increasingly respectable financial people are saying there's going to be in UK next year. That is, you're not talking recession, you're talking depression. And you're getting towards hyperinflation, which will completely destroy the savings of the middle classes.
Yes.
Yeah. On one hand, you get some people on the right who say, "Oh well, this is their plan all along." But I'm thinking, what kind of country destroys its own middle class willingly? I suppose that's my question.
Well, look, even if you're one of these elite theory guys, who doesn't believe in anything populist ever happening, and I'm not totally in that camp, but I do see where they're coming from. Your middle class, and particularly like your small and middle-sized business owners and these kinds of people, they are people who actually can provide some sort of leadership to. I won't say a revolution because I think that's too strong, but you know what I mean.
Like any sort of dissident movement, yeah.
Yeah, they're the backbone of any like revolutionary movement in many ways, and also they're also in revolution movements. They can also be seen as like the own potential. I mean, because they are the kulaks, of course, for the other side, I guess. If so, yeah.
So that's all I'm saying is I just think there may be a silver lining in this dark cloud, and all of us are going to suffer. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I know I am. Like the bills I'm getting now are just ridiculous compared to what they used to be. And I mean, I'm semi-retired, so yeah. But this dark cloud that is going to engulf us may have, for those of us on the real right, or the dissident right, if you prefer, it may have a silver lining. Maybe, if we're lucky.
There's no hope. Everything's lost.
No, I'm never going to accept that. I mean, look, Britain's been in the ship many, many times and has fought their way out of it. So maybe we can find our way out of this one still. I'm not going to give up on it just yet.
I think there is a way out, but I don't think there's nobody. Number one, there isn't, as someone mentioned up earlier, the current regime would never allow someone to do what needs to be done to get things fixed. And then, there's nobody currently in the current regime that has any will to actually do what needs to be done anyway. So,
you've definitely got to at least get a large minority of third right of centre party people into Parliament. You've got to do that. Like if you're a Conservative voter, you need to look at your individual MP. And if he's one of the, 30 or 40 Conservatives who are actually Conservative, by all means, vote for that dude. Absolutely do that. But the rest of them, many of whom are not at all Conservative, I mean, from Boris Johnson downwards, Boris Johnson's not Conservative in any way, shape or form, really. Yes. Nor is Liz Truss, who was a Remainer, what Lib Dem person originally. Nor is Rishi Sunak, who's a very rich Indian banker. None of these people are Conservatives. And so if you are someone who really wants some sort of Conservative movement in the UK, you have to change who you vote for. You have to. But that's only going to work if all these small right of centre, more or less populist parties, at the very least, get some sort of electoral pact together so they don't put up candidates against each other.
Yeah, that's my main problem. I mean, you take, for example, where I live, it's a Tory voting area, it's a rural Tory voting area, but we don't live far from Birmingham. So so when the cities are fully diversified and will start to branch out, my town will be one of the first hit by that.
Well, even more reason not to vote Conservative, who brought in 1 million legal immigrants last year.
Yeah, and that's the main point is either people don't like the people who either care about this stuff either keep voting Tory because they can't change their voting patterns, or they just don't bother voting at all. Which
see, I think that's foolish. I know that there are these people who say you should just walk away from it. I don't think that will work in the UK. Like, you might have a chance in a huge country like the US of forming some little community somewhere. I don't rate your chances, but you might be able to. In the UK, there's no space to do that.
No.
There just isn't space to do that. Sorry, Karen.
I was going to say, I've even seen in the UK that the current government and ministers within government are now. One of the ministers was on GB News this morning, and he was talking about clamping down on homeschooling kids. That they and kids who aren't going back to school, and parents are deciding either not to. Well, either they're like from troubled households and they're just not going to school because they're out, breaking stuff and doing all sorts. But there's also a small portion that are just haven't gone back to school because the parents decide to home educate them for various reasons. Maybe they don't want, pro-nonce indoctrination being shoved down their neck in schools. Could be something like that, or teaching their kids that they should be ashamed of themselves because of their race. I don't know. Anywho, the government, the Tory minister was saying that we need to put a stop to this. That this is dangerous and all that sort of stuff.
It's a bit like making the trains run on time is somehow fascist. So look, if parents want to educate their own children, they should be allowed to educate their own children. I mean, what's that got to do with the government? It shouldn't have anything to do with the government.
Well, kids won't be indoctrinated with
you won't get the LGBTQ shit shoved down their throat every day.
You might actually have kids who come out of the system or come out into adulthood who are, number one, not indoctrinated and actually could be potential rivals.
Yep. George in the chat saying.
Georgia, that education bill, which is planning to, because the way they're selling it to the average Tory is that it's not about restricting religious education and homeschooling. It's actually about truancy, like kids who are just like not turning up to school, and that's a really deceitful.
Yeah, of course it is. There are umpteen stuff that deals with truancy already.
Yeah, it's already in place. It's just about councils enforcing it. But of course, that's how they're selling it to the public. And he called it like ghost children. I mean, can you bloody believe that? Ghost children, like what?
It's just a lie, basically. It's just a lie because, like I said, the leadership of the Conservative Party is in no way, shape, or form actually conservative at all. No. They're just not. It's the whole leadership of the Conservative Party is a con job. It's the only way you can describe them. Like Tories heir to the Blair edition. Absolutely, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, David Cameron's autobiography, which I've got to. There is like straight off the bat, he just admits that he is the heir to Blair. I mean, Blair is the best thing since sliced bread. Blair created modern Britain, and in many ways,
one of the most evil traitors in Britain's entire history. Yeah, right.
And to be honest, Cameron is actually not wrong. Blair did create modern Britain. He destroyed old Britain and he created modern Britain.
Oh, for sure, yeah. But I mean, that's not a good thing. No. And how can the leader of a Conservative Party or one-time leader of a Conservative Party say that was a good thing? It's just like. What do Conservative voters need to wake them up? Someone to come along and slap them around the face with a gigantic wet fish.
I think I go back to what sorry, go ahead, Anglo.
I was just going to say, I can remember one time when I was campaigning for UKIP back in the Euro elections. I wasn't old enough to vote back then, but they still let me campaign with them. And I went up to this like Tory I went up to a bunch of like Tory fellas and was like, "Oh, will you vote for UKIP in the Euro election?" I go, "No," and over to vote Tory. And eventually, the conversation went to a point where I just asked, "Okay, I'm just coming to a point where if Boris Johnson came around your house, or if a chairman of a Tory party came around your house tomorrow, shot your dog, raped your wife, and burned your house down, you'd still vote Conservative, wouldn't you?" And the Tory fellas just went, "Yeah, we probably would."
That's ridiculous.
I mean,
That's just so ridiculous.
Like, never doubt the stupidity of the average rural Tory voter at this point.
I don't know.
It's about as shocking as a Labour voter, really.
I mean, there's not much difference between the modern Conservative Party and Labour. The differences are, in most respects, they're paper thin.
Yeah. And also, don't forget, it's been reported that Liz Truss, of course, is favourite to be the next leader of the Conservative Party and the next Prime Minister, has had long talks with Tony Blair over the campaign. And she's been talking, and while she was a minister, she talked to Blair about policy, government policy. So, Blair's, what's he talking about now? He's 70. He wants 75% of youth to go to university. He wants price caps here on this, and he wants and I think someone in the chat has just mentioned Doxastic Draco has just mentioned that Blair is proposing biometric ID cards as a way of
yeah.
That's the way 6 months ago he said, biometric IDs, this is going to happen. It's inevitable. One of Blair's tactics, always saying.
When we're saying biometric ID cards, guys, what we're talking about is people having a chip like your dog or cat might have.
Yeah, there's the mark of the beast by the Antichrist, and his back then it was about COVID, and it was about. I mean, he's been quite open. He says it was about monitoring population to prevent outbreaks and everything. But then he said in an interview, but the way we're going to sell it to the stupid right wingers is that we're going to say that this is how we're going to control immigration by biometric ID technology.
Because they won't use it for that anyway. But
yeah.
Oh God, it's just so crazy. It really is. All right, guys. We've been going just over an hour and a half. Any final thoughts from either of you?
Not that I can think of for myself.
Did you have anything you wanted to bring up as a final point, AI?
Not that I can think of, no.
Okay. Either of you have anything you would like to shill? Like YouTube channels or Twitter accounts and all this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I've got my AI Shire Tory account. If you go on there, there's some pretty good streams with. I had one with Alexander Adams, who's a artist, author. We had a very good sort of discussion on the current state of the art world and what's going on there. And I think some of your viewers might find it interesting. We actually referenced people like the Voice of Wales and everything.
So I watched that. That was actually a good stream. Yeah, I saw that one. It was good.
Yeah, that was a really good stream, and he's also I should say he's artist, author, and GB News contributor as well. So yeah, I go check that out. That was a really good stream.
Do me a favor, AI. If you will DM me that on the Discord, I'll make sure I put it in the description of the stream.
Yep, sure.
You like your channel address. Anything you wanted to show, Engwood?
No, I can't say if I've got anything to show now.
All right.
Aside from like what I usually do on the Discord server in terms of news about Ukraine or just doing my regular shit posting or whatever.
Yeah, well, they can't watch it on my Discord server because my Discord server is not an open one. So,
yeah.
But yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to play us out of a tune, and then after that, I do have something to show. Okay, that was, of course, Rule Britannia, which dates back to 1740 in a poem by Thomas Arne. And it's closely associated with the Royal Navy in the days before we had only 17 frigates and destroyers. Anyway, well, thank you to both my guests, Angloid Khan and AI, for joining us. I would just like to shill a couple of things. Obviously, we'll be back at the same time next week with Splendid Isolation number 87. However, I would also like to shill on the 8th of September, I will be doing part 3 of British Policy 1914-1942 with Horace and Adaman, which is and Winston Churchill, by the way, British Policy 1914, 1942, and Winston Churchill, with Horace and Atman, which is largely, but not entirely, based on Buchanan's book, Hitler, Churchill, and the Unnecessary War. So do look out for that one. If you come back and look at the stream in a couple of hours, there will be a link to AI's channel in the description. And that's probably all I've got to say. Go well, folks, and we'll see you next time.